Dzień dobry Państwu, bardzo dziękuję.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for the invitation to this event on behalf of the Chief Chamber Audit Chamber. And I'd like to thank you also on behalf of our branch in Kraków and on behalf of myself. I represent our office in Lublin. For a few years we've been dealing with this issue related to radio waves and the use of mobile phone base stations. And today I will be speaking on the role of state authorities in preventive and protective actions aimed at protecting people from excessive exposure to electromagnetic fields. By way of introduction, I would like to say that we are in the process of our controlling activities. These activities will end soon, and we will publish a report at the end of November, maybe beginning of December, and this report will include the key issues related to the role of state authorities, as state authorities should, under law, protect us against excessive exposure to electromagnetic fields. Excessive exposure is something I'd like to cover briefly. This is a definition provided by the General Institute of Labor Protection. Excessive exposure is the conditions of work when an employee is in the electromagnetic field and the exposure indicator is above the value of 1. As a result of such circumstances, this employee may suffer negative health effects.
Jest zjawisko, co obserwujemy, taki jest też kierunek rozwoju naszej cywilizacji.
We've been observing an increasing intensity of electromagnetic fields within the human environment. Why is it happening? Well, it is related to the dynamic development of the mobile phone market. More and more people use mobile phones, in particular mobile internet. The previous speakers spoke about the situation in more detail, and maybe in the future we will have separate devices used for calling other people and separate devices for getting online using the internet. We also keep implementing new standards in mobile technologies. We have the 3D technology, the 4D technology, and now we will soon have the 5G technology. So we are on the verge of the 5th generation of the mobile technologies. Once this technology is implemented, definitely the telecommunications infrastructure will have to be expanded. So all these factors have an impact on the environment as they generate electromagnetic fields. What kind of protective measures are available? Well, these protective measures are part of the institutional activity of the state. There are protective mechanisms included in the development of new mobile network stations at the stage of the infrastructure development, and the investor must meet certain requirements. The investor must obtain a building permit, report the works done, and as you know, we have building construction law, and any system that is below 3 meters, according to this law, no formal requirements are in place. And if the system is above 3 meters high, you have to report development of this system. And you have to report the system to an environmental agency, and the values of the field must be measured. But the system itself is a declarative system. I mean, the operator must provide all these documents on the basis of the activities taken by the operator himself. And you need to verify whether the limits for electromagnetic fields are met. And we have two major bodies responsible for the activities of the state, environmental inspection bodies and sanitary inspection bodies. And also there are special operators accredited by the Polish Accreditation Center. Protective mechanisms must be assessed at the pre-investment level. So the main conclusions from the controlling activities we carried out in 2014 and 2015 are as follows. There were three major issues. We decided that the provisions of the construction law and the environmental protection law are non-uniform and insufficiently specific. I have already mentioned that any system below 3 meters is not related to any requirements. So we have a problem, and it's a problem for operators too. Operators do not often know how to operate on the market, and officials also don't know which laws should apply to certain situations. There are no requirements if the system is below 3 meters, and if the system is above 3 meters, those who interpret the law may have different requirements. Some of them say that it is necessary to report an investment to an administration body, but some say that it is necessary to obtain a building permit related to the entire construction process. So in the administrative proceedings, the court takes the final decision. And also courts have differences of opinion. Some administrative courts say, yes, it's enough to report such an investment, but there are many court decisions, administrative court decisions, that say that it's not enough, that for every system that includes a mobile network base station and is installed on a building, I'm talking about buildings, not open space, you need a building permit. Why? You need a building permit because under the building law in Article 3, Clause 9, we have information on the development of such a system or any system, but the system must be a part of the functionality of the building. So if this is a kindergarten, you can have a system that would serve the needs of the children. For example, there would be a platform above the building where children could play. And if this is a residential building, a typical residential building, this system should serve the residents of the building. For example, it could be an elevator or solar panels powering the flats in the building, but not a base station, a mobile network base station, because a mobile network base station it's not an integral part of a residential building. So this is what the courts think. So we have two different situations here, and we have non-uniform law. Hence our conclusion that this situation cannot be continued. It cannot be continued because we are not solving the problem here. We are just the situation is just deteriorating. I mean, what if we have a 5G technology and more investments into this technology? I mean, it will be a huge problem for operators and for national bodies. Also, there are no legal instruments that would enable legislative bodies to assess the situation as regards the plot and the neighboring plots and the impact on the neighboring plots. The impact on the neighboring plots is a huge problem. We have the president here with us, and you might know very well that this is a huge problem, and there is no uniform procedure that would enable us to assess the situation of the impact of a new base station on the environment, and at the same time, this station should not be a barrier to the development of the telecommunications infrastructure. We need to remember that as a country, as the European continent, we keep developing, and no one who wants to develop wants to reverse this development. I mean, we need to develop, we need socioeconomic development, but also telecommunications companies make a part of this development, participate in this development, but the procedures must be clear, both for companies and for society, and at the same time, technology and the socioeconomic development cannot bridge the principles of the constitution of any European state, namely the state should protect the health and lives of its citizens. So technological development, socioeconomic development cannot happen at the cost of the health of citizens. Well, this control is entitled the activities of public bodies as regards the protection against electromagnetic field generated by mobile devices. And this control is a natural control subsequent to the previous one. We have to carry out measurements as regards different base stations. The formal requirements at the level of construction do not guarantee that the standards related to the quality of the environment might not be met. Well, this is not the conclusion of our controlling process, as the process is not over, and if it's not over, I cannot discuss the details of the process. So we have a thesis now, and it was publicly announced at the experts panel organized at our audit chamber in February 2018, and one of the scientists stated this thesis at this meeting. The requirements do not guarantee that the status quo is going to be maintained in the environment of a base station. So even if the formal and legal requirements are met, then once the base station is launched, then the situation might change. And this is where the risk lies, and state authorities should, or state bodies should examine what is going on. And there are special units of the sanitary inspection, and they control all the admissible levels within the vicinity of a base station. Protection against electromagnetic fields means that we have to make sure that the environment is safe for people, and we do that by maintaining the levels for the electromagnetic field and the allowable value or below the allowable value or values, and if they are exceeded, then we have to limit these values to the level of allowable values. Allowable values for electromagnetic fields and the methodology of measurements were determined by the relevant resolution of the Ministry of the Environment. What bodies are responsible for it? We have an inspectorate, an environmental protection inspectorate, and a sanitary inspectorate, and these are two state bodies that deal with these issues, the issues of the intensity of fields, allowable levels in the environment. The environmental inspectorate includes 16 regional inspectorates and the general inspectorate in Warsaw. And the same is the case for the sanitary inspectorate. We have the general inspectorate and 16 regional inspectorates. Mobile network operators have a legal obligation to measure electromagnetic fields, and there are accredited laboratories that carry out these measurements. The Polish Accreditation Center issues licenses for these measurements. The Environmental Inspectorate was created to control whether the necessary regulations are fulfilled. But this is not the only task of the Environmental Inspectorate. I mean, there are many tasks that the Environmental Inspectorate has to deal with, as there are many factors that pose a threat for people and animals, for the health of people and animals. But one task is to control the entities, whether they meet the environmental protection regulations, which includes the level of electromagnetic fields close to base stations, and also there are regulations concerning the way of measurement. And monitoring the environment within the area of electromagnetic fields is also one of the obligations of the inspectorate. The sanitary inspectorate is responsible for health issues and health protection, which includes supervision over the conditions of radiation hygiene, because public health includes the impact of electromagnetic fields on human bodies, and the inspectorate is responsible for the supervision of this aspect of hygiene, and it is responsible for protecting human health. So its tasks include the following: controlling the relevant regulations, including those related to the allowable values near base stations, initiating various projects on the prevention of negative effects on the health of people, as well as dissemination of knowledge about human health, which aims to promote certain human behavior, and that includes eliminating the negative impact of physical phenomena on the health of people. The previous speakers have already mentioned a very important thing, namely education and promotion of information. If we fail to inform people on how to take advantage of various technological developments, and at the same time not to hurt our own health. And we have to remember that we need to promote this information among young people. If we fail to do that, we will never minimize the negative effects of these technological developments, because definitely modern technologies are beneficial, but if we are unable to use these modern technologies, then we may suffer negative effects. Like, for example, if you have a burner on, a burner is a great invention, but if it's on, you may get burned if you don't know how to use it. So you have to be able to reach out to these young people and children, because quick development of various these modern technologies means that we will have intensified magnetic fields. I mean, the technology must change one day in the future. At one point in time in the future, a different magnetic field, a different one than the one we know now, might not be so harmful. But we need to educate young people so that we avoid the situations reported by research centers on biology and medicine, namely the negative impact of such devices on the human development, especially the development of the human brain. Also, measurements must be made near base stations. Operators are obliged under the law to carry out these measurements immediately after the base station is launched, and also every time any equipment is changed, these measurements must be carried out. Unfortunately, during the previous controlling activities, we confirmed a situation in Kraków when the intensity was exceeded by 8 times at one station. These measurements are made by labs that have the necessary accreditation, and provincial inspectorates, provincial environmental inspectorates and sanitary inspectorates receive the results of these measurements. The aim is to check whether the allowable level of the magnetic field is maintained near the base station. The standard in Poland now is 7 watts per kilogram. In France, the standard is higher, but that's a separate story. And let's discuss the key areas of the controlling activities today. Well, we check whether controlling activities are prepared to carry out their tasks. We check how and to what extent they are prepared to do it. And we focus on the mobile phone radiation, and we focus on meeting allowable levels, and also on the measurements carried out by operators. We monitor these activities. We carry out a national monitoring, and also we carry out educational activities as regards protection against radiation. And the key question here is the following. Do the activities of public bodies as regards protection against radiation coming from mobile networks were correct and effective? Thank you very much for your attention.